The air in Yorkshire's moorlands was thick with the scent of decaying leaves and damp soil. Fog curled around the ancient oaks like ghostly fingers, making the landscape a labyrinth of shadows. Ambrose Weigall, a skeptic by nature and a man hardened by years of city life, had returned to his ancestral home after years abroad. His cousin, Geoffrey Rhodes, had been missing for a week. Though the local constable dismissed it as another case of a wayward aristocrat lost in London's excesses, Ambrose knew better. Geoffrey wasn't the sort to vanish without explanation. He loved the moors, the strange, otherworldly expanse of green and gray that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. But the moors held their secrets tightly, and Ambrose feared they had swallowed his cousin whole. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about Wharfdale, a narrow ravine cutting through the heart of the moors. At its deepest point, a thin, treacherous stone bridge known as the Striding Place spanned the chasm. The bridge, they said, was cursed. Centuries ago, a huntsman chasing a stag had misstepped and fallen to his death, his ghost forever bound to the place. Since then, tales of strange occurrences abounded, disembodied whispers, flickering lights, and an inexplicable pull that drew wanderers to their doom. Ambrose dismissed such tales as superstition. Yet something in the villager's eyes, a mix of fear and certainty, unsettled him. Determined to find Geoffrey, he set off for Wharfdale under the pale light of a waning moon. The journey to Wharfdale was arduous. The fog thickened as Ambrose approached the ravine, muffling his footsteps and blurring the edges of the world. When he reached the Striding Place, he paused, heart hammering in his chest. The bridge was narrower than he had imagined, barely wider than a man's stride. Below, the ravine plunged into darkness, the faint gurgle of a stream echoing like a dirge. As Ambrose stepped onto the bridge, the air grew colder. He felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, an oppressive silence broken only by the sound of his own breathing. Halfway across, he stopped. A faint glimmer caught his eye, a figure lying motionless on the far side of the bridge. It was Geoffrey. Ambrose's relief was short-lived. As he knelt beside his cousin, he realized something was wrong. Geoffrey's eyes were open but unseeing, his body unnaturally stiff. Yet his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, as if caught in some waking nightmare. Ambrose shook him, calling his name, but Geoffrey remained unresponsive. Suddenly, a low whisper echoed through the ravine. Ambrose froze. The sound was not human, a guttural, melodic hum that seemed to emanate from the very earth. The shadows around him deepened, shifting and writhing as if alive. A voice, cold and hollow, spoke. "He belongs to us now." Ambrose turned, heart racing. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, indistinct form cloaked in darkness. Its face was featureless, save for two gleaming eyes that burned like embers. The figure gestured toward Geoffrey. "To take him, you must give something in return." "A soul for a soul." Ambrose hesitated. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to run, to leave this cursed place and never look back. But as he looked at Geoffrey's lifeless form, memories of their childhood flooded his mind, games played on these very moors, whispered secrets shared beneath starry skies. He couldn't abandon him. "I'll do it," Ambrose said, his voice trembling. The figure extended a shadowy hand. Ambrose reached out, and the moment their hands touched, a searing pain shot through his body. Darkness consumed him. When Ambrose awoke, he was lying on the moor, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Geoffrey knelt beside him, alive and well, though his face bore the haunted look of someone who had seen the edge of the abyss. "You saved me," Geoffrey whispered. "But how?" Ambrose couldn't answer. His memories of the night were fragmented, a blur of shadows and whispers. Yet he felt an inexplicable emptiness within him, as if a part of his soul had been torn away. As they walked back to the village, Ambrose glanced over his shoulder. The Striding Place loomed in the distance, shrouded in mist. He knew he had made a bargain with something far older and darker than he could comprehend. And though he had saved Geoffrey, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cost of his decision was far from paid. Years later, Ambrose would often wake in the dead of night, his dreams filled with the sound of whispers and the gleam of ember-like eyes. He never returned to the striding place, but he felt its pull, an unrelenting force that grew stronger with each passing year. And one moonless night, when the moors were silent and the fog rolled in thick as wool, Ambrose disappeared. Some said he had gone mad, others that he had wandered too far into the moors. But those who knew the tales of Wharfdale whispered a different story. The striding place always claimed what was owed. High in the snow-covered Rockies, where the winds howled like restless spirits, the majestic Glenwood Hotel stood as a beacon of isolation. Its sprawling corridors and grand ballrooms told tales of opulence, yet its shadows whispered secrets of madness. The Glenwood had seen better days, but now, as winter approached, it prepared for its seasonal solitude. Jacob Thorne, a struggling novelist, arrived at the hotel with his wife, Lydia, and their 7-year-old son, Caleb. Jacob had accepted the position of winter caretaker, seeing it as an opportunity to focus on his writing. For him, the silence of the mountains promised inspiration. For the Glenwood, it promised a captive audience. The Thorne family's arrival was greeted with crisp mountain air and the warm smile of Mr. Hawthorne, the hotel's manager. "You'll find it peaceful here," Hawthorne said as he led them through the hotel's grand halls. "But don't let the isolation get to you. The mind can play tricks in a place like this." Lydia noted the grandeur with quiet awe, the glittering chandeliers, the polished wooden floors, and the eerie perfection of the decor. Caleb, clutching a toy car, seemed enthralled by the endless corridors. But it was Jacob who felt an inexplicable pull, as though the Glenwood was welcoming him, whispering promises only he could hear. Within days, the snowstorm arrived, blanketing the hotel and cutting it off from the outside world. The Thorne family settled into their routine. Jacob wrote feverishly, Lydia explored the hotel's history, and Caleb roamed the halls with his vivid imagination. But soon, the whispers began. Caleb was the first to notice. He'd hear faint voices calling his name, drawing him toward room 217, a room his parents had been explicitly warned to avoid. One evening, as Caleb stood outside the door, he saw fleeting shadows under the threshold and heard the faint sound of laughter. "Who's in there?" he whispered. The door creaked open, but before he could enter, Lydia's voice called him back. She found him pale and trembling. "It's just an old room, sweetheart," Lydia assured him. But deep down, she felt a chill she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Jacob's writing took a darker turn. Pages filled with disjointed sentences and violent imagery. He'd sit for hours, muttering to himself, his typewriter's clacks echoing through the empty halls. Lydia grew worried, but every time she approached him, he'd brush her off. "I'm fine," he'd snap. "This place, it's unlocking something in me. Something brilliant." Late one night, Lydia woke to find Jacob absent from their bed. She wandered the hotel until she found him in the grand ballroom, speaking to someone who wasn't there. "They understand me," Jacob said, his eyes glazed. "They want me to finish my masterpiece." Lydia's heart raced. "Who, Jacob? Who are you talking to?" He turned to her with a chilling smile. "The Glenwood's true patrons." Unable to ignore the growing unease, Lydia began researching the hotel's past. She discovered a history of tragedies, a family murdered by the father, a maid who hanged herself, and whispers of occult rituals. All paths led to room 217. Determined to uncover the truth, Lydia ventured into the forbidden room. Inside, she found a scene frozen in time. A decayed yet lavish suite, with the faint scent of decay lingering in the air. On the dresser lay a photo album filled with black and white images of past hotel guests, their eyes lifeless and hollow. In the bathroom, the tub was filled with dark, stagnant water. As Lydia approached, a pale hand emerged, clawing at the edge. She fled, the sound of wet footsteps echoing behind her. Caleb, unbeknownst to his parents, had a gift. He called it the shine, an ability to sense things others couldn't. The Glenwood spoke to him, its voice a mix of allure and menace. It showed him visions of the past, blood-streaked halls, shadowy figures, and his father, consumed by madness. "You have to leave," a voice warned him. It belonged to a kind man named Samuel, a former caretaker who had left behind a fragment of his soul to protect those who came after him. "But my dad," Caleb whispered. "He's vulnerable. The Glenwood feeds on him. Save him before it's too late." Jacob's descent into madness reached its peak. One evening, Lydia found his typewriter filled with a single phrase repeated endlessly. He turned on her, accusing her of sabotaging his work, of conspiring against him. His once loving gaze was now filled with fury. Lydia and Caleb barricaded themselves in a suite as Jacob roamed the halls with an axe, his footsteps heavy with intent. "You can't hide forever," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. Guided by Samuel's voice, Caleb led Lydia to the heart of the Glenwood, the boiler room. There, they found an ancient, pulsing mass embedded in the walls, its presence radiating malice. "Destroy it," Samuel urged. "It's the source of its power." As Lydia worked to disable the boiler, Jacob appeared, his axe raised. Caleb stepped between his parents, his small frame glowing with an inner light. "Dad, fight it," Caleb pleaded. "You're stronger than this." For a moment, Jacob hesitated, the light breaking through his rage. In that instant, Lydia triggered the boiler's failsafe. The Glenwood trembled as the entity within it howled, its power collapsing in on itself. The Thorne family escaped as the Glenwood was consumed by flames, its towering structure reduced to ash. Jacob, though haunted by what he'd done, found solace in his family's forgiveness. Caleb's gift remained a secret, one he promised to use wisely. The Rockies stood silent once more, the Glenwood's whispers silenced. Yet, in the depths of the charred ruins, a faint echo lingered. "Come back."